got this feeling inside my bones. It goes electric wavy when I turn it on. Off from my city, off from my home. We're flying up, no ceiling when we in our zone. I got that sunshine in my pocket, got that good soul in my feet. I feel that hot blood in my body when it drops. Ooh, I can't take my eyes off of it, moving so phenomenally. You're more like the way we rock it, so don't stop. And under the lights when everything goes, nowhere to hide when I'm getting you close. When we move, well, you already know. So just imagine. Nothing I can see but you when you dance, dance, dance. Feel good, good creeping up on you. So just dance, dance, dance. Come on. All those things I shouldn't do, but you dance, dance, dance. And ain't nobody leaving soon, so keep dancing. I can't stop the feeling. So just dance, dance, dance. So just dance, 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 come on. Ooh, it's something magical. It's in the air, it's in my blood, it's rushing on. I don't need no reason, don't need control. I fly so high, no ceiling when I'm in my zone. Cause I got that sunshine in my pocket, got that good soul in my feet. I feel that hot blood in my body when it drops. Ooh, I can't take my eyes off it, moving so phenomenally. You're more like the way we rock it, so don't stop, stop, stop. Under the lights when everything goes, nowhere to hide when I'm getting you close. When we move, well, you already know. So just imagine. Nothing I can see but you when you dance, dance, dance. Feel good, good creeping up on you. So just dance, dance, dance. Come on. All those things I shouldn't do, but you dance, dance, dance. And ain't nobody leaving soon, so keep dancing. I can't stop the feeling. So just dance, dance, dance. So just dance, dance, dance. Stop the feeling. So just dance, dance, dance. I can't stop the feeling. Yeah. So keep dancing. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. I can't stop the. 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 Nothing I can see but you when you dance, dance, dance. Feel good, good creeping up on you. So just dance, dance, dance. Come on. All those things I shouldn't do, but you dance, dance, dance. And ain't nobody leaving soon, so keep dancing. Everybody say.
Please welcome the chairman of the Western Conservative Summit, Jeff Hunt.
I want everybody up on their feet. Everybody, all the conservatives, everyone up on their feet. All right, because here's the deal. We've got a lot of press back there. We've got thousands of people watching us online. This is the largest gathering of grassroots conservatives outside of Washington, D.C. So when we get to the chorus, I want everybody to sing, "Welcome to our house," all right? So you got everyone watching, you ready? Here we go. Everybody, welcome to our house. Yeah, there we go. Welcome to our house. I love it. Boldly proclaiming faith, family, and freedom. freedom. Welcome to our house. Welcome to our house. Now listen, if you're under 30 years old and you're at the Western Conservative Summit, make some noise. Awesome. Now, if you're over 60 years old and you're the statesman at the Western Conservative Summit, make some noise. I love it. Keep singing. Tell the whole world, welcome to our house. Welcome to our house.
Baby, take control now. We can't even slow down. We don't have to go wild. Welcome to our house. Play that music too loud. Show me what you do now.
We're telling the whole world about faith, family, and freedom. Welcome to our house. Nice. Welcome to our house. Now, friends, I am proud to introduce to you the president of Colorado Christian University. Please welcome Dr. Donald Sweeting. Welcome to our house.
Baby, take control now. We
Keep going.
We don't have to go. Cheers to this.
Welcome to our house.
Play that music too loud. Show me what you do now. We don't have to go.
Two more times for the whole world. Faith, family, and freedom. Welcome to our house.
You heard me? We ain't gotta go out, 'cause what?
Welcome to our house. One more time, everybody. One more time. Welcome to our house.
It's my house.
Nice.
Ladies and gentlemen, from coast to coast, from over 40 states, from the front lines of activism to the backbenches, we're here in the beautiful state of Colorado, and it's time to gavel up for the 2017 Western Conservative Summit. So let the 2017 Summit begin.
Thank you. All right, we're going to start it out the right way. Please welcome to lead us in prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance, Tegan Truitt and Michaela Myers. We'll start with the prayer.
If you'll close your eyes and bow your heads with me in prayer. Father in heaven, we bow our hearts before you. We ask you to bless our time together this weekend. We thank you for the opportunity to live in a country as free as ours, that we can come together in a society that is so hostile to our values, and yet we can still come together in this society and celebrate those values of faith, family, and freedom as a collective together tonight and throughout this weekend. We ask, in addition to you blessing this summit, that you bless our country. We know that we live in a time where the values of our culture are antithetical to the values that we hold in our hearts. And so we ask first and foremost that your will be done. But if there is any room in your will for it, that you start to change the hearts and minds of Americans and turn them back toward you. We pray first for our politicians, our leaders, both elected and those unelected, appointed. Anyone who has to make a decision in government, we ask that you guide them and lead them to make the moral, wise, and just decision. More importantly than that, we ask that you bless the hearts and minds of the American people, especially people of younger generations, the millennials and Gen Z. We ask that you shine your face upon them and bring them back to you, that you reawaken in each of our hearts the values that you would seek, that you would have us uphold. Put simply, God, we ask that you bless America. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Great. Well done, Tegan.
Please join me as we say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Please welcome Legacy Quartet.
Please stand. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Well, we bring them back every single year. They're fantastic. Many of them teach at Colorado Christian University, and so we're so proud to have Legacy Quartet with us. Well, friends, before we begin the Western Conservative Summit and get into stuff, I want to send a message to our friends in Washington, D.C. You know, this is our 8th annual Western Conservative Summit. For the past 7 years, we've heard, just get conservatives into the House and we'll take on Obamacare. And then we heard, just get conservatives into the Senate and we'll take on Obamacare. And then we heard, just get a conservative into the White House and we'll take on Obamacare. Well, to my friends in Washington, D.C., I have a message from Western conservatives. No more excuses. It's time to repeal Obamacare. Get it done. We sent you there for a reason. It's time to deliver on your promises. I also want to talk to you all about our motto this year, making goodness fashionable. You see, our calling as conservatives is to not only be successful at the ballot box, but to shape the culture around us, to make morals, virtue, and goodness fashionable again. See, conservatives understand this key point, that the more virtuous our communities are, the less government we need. The more moral, the more kind, the more good we are, the more productive, the more safe, the more caring our community becomes, and we don't need government to do that. So I want to encourage you this weekend to think big about social reformation, about the promotion of virtue in combination to freedom and justice. In truth, that's what sets us apart as conservatives. We understand that those three must work together: freedom, justice, and virtue. Our mission is to not only win at the ballot box and put conservatives into positions of leadership, but to make goodness fashionable. Now, friends, I am so excited to introduce to you our next speaker, a true Western conservative. Ryan Zinke was sworn in as the 52nd Secretary of the Interior on March 1st, 2017. A fifth-generation Montanan and former U.S. Navy SEAL commander, Ryan Zinke built one of the strongest track records in the 114th Congress on championing sportsman access, conservation, regulatory relief, forest management, responsible energy development, and smart management of federal lands. As Secretary of the Interior, Ryan Zinke leads an agency with more than 70,000 employees who are stewards of 20% of the nation's lands, including national parks, monuments, wildlife refuges, and public lands. The department oversees the responsible development of conventional and renewable energy supplies on public lands and waters, is the largest supplier and manager of water in 17 western states, and upholds trust responsibilities to the 567 federally recognized American Indian and Alaska Natives. Ryan Zinke represented the state of Montana in the U.S. House of Representatives since 2014. Before that, he served in the Montana State Senate from 2009 to 2011. But the bulk of his public service, and this is why I think we have so much respect for him, was 23 years as a U.S. Navy SEAL officer. That is great, isn't it? Ryan and his wife have 3 children and 2 granddaughters. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome a true Western conservative, ladies and gentlemen, the U.S. Secretary of the Interior, Ryan Zinke.
Please welcome the U.S. Secretary of the Interior, Ryan Zinke.
Oh, come on, come on, come on. Well, you know it's a conservative when you open up with the Pledge of Allegiance and the Star-Spangled Banner. Thank you. Well, it's also nice to be in God's country where God and country you can say together. So thank you. You know, Interior, I had no expectation of being the Secretary of Interior. But when you get in the office, it's a little different. Every time I go through a park down, I look to make sure we're in the right uniform and the bathrooms are clean. But Interior is 12 time zones. It stretches all the way from Virgin Islands to Palau. It's about 1/5 of the territory of our great lands. And to be the steward of our great lands is an enormous responsibility. But our great lands, our treasures, belong to us. And the difference in the Trump administration is this. Believe it or not, I work for you. So Interior, is that Interior should be the trusted steward. We should be the nice department. We should be the department that says, yep. And the challenges I face is trust. Is that it disturbs me when we don't trust our government and how far we've come from the government that I grew up in, the government of Reagan, where when the president would say something, you knew it was true, when our government was on our side. So our president, with the exception of me, I think has picked an enormously talented cabinet. And I can tell you, I sleep better at night when I know that Jim Mattis, who I fought with in Fallujah, is running our military. And I sleep really good at night when I know that General Kelly, now Secretary Kelly, is guarding our borders. And I know my pocketbook sleeps pretty good when you have Mnuchin and Wilbur Ross guarding my checkbook. But getting back to trust, you know, where did America turn where we don't trust our government? And how do we get it back? And a lot of it is working with local communities, working with our state, looking at the relationship between our people and our government, and understanding that the American experience is worth fighting for. But also, I'll tell you a little problem about Interior. If you go back to 2008, Interior was the #2 revenue generator in our country, right behind our friends of the IRS. In offshore alone, Interior made about $18 billion a year. That's a lot of money. Last year, we made 2.6. We lost $15 billion of revenue a year. So when I came in, and everyone loves our parks are about $11.5 billion behind in maintenance and repair. Overall, Interior that protects our lands and our wildlife refuges, we're about $15 billion a year. So in scale, we would have addressed our entire backlog of maintenance repair and been able to deliver $3 billion of additional investment which we need in 1 year. So that's the consequence of putting 94% of our offshore off limits. That's the consequence of not harvesting trees on land. That's the consequence of locking and shutting American energy and access and recreation from our lands. And I can tell you, the war on American energy is over. So why does it make a difference? I can tell you in my heart, I never want to see your children and your grandchildren see what I've seen. I fought in a lot of countries. And I have never want to see our children have to go to war over resources we have here. Secondly, it is better to produce energy. Isn't this great? Well, I can tell you something. We won. We won. For the right reasons. I can tell you it's better to produce energy here under reasonable regulation. And I'm a great admirer of Roosevelt. I don't believe that our public lands should be sold or traded or transferred. But we should use our public lands. But we should use our public lands for the benefit of all Americans. It is better to produce energy here under reasonable regulation than watch it be produced overseas with none. And if you want to look at environmental catastrophe, I invite you to look at Saudi Arabia or the Middle East or Africa. America should never produce energy in that way. And lastly, our energy as a nation is a game changer. I'm a geologist. I was taught absolutely we would be out of energy definitively in 2003. Well, God's got a sense of humor. He gave us fracking. And fracking's made a difference because we don't have to be held hostage from foreign entities on our energy. And if we're worried about ICBMs in Iran, we should be. But how do you approach Iran? There's two ways. Militarily, which I do not want to put our children in battle over a resource we have here, or economically. It is better to position ourselves economically for energy dominance. Because with energy dominance, we can control our own future as a country, we can have jobs at home, we can have industry, and if we need to, we can apply leverage overseas. That is America. On our public lands, it's about access. It's about enjoyment. And when you visit parks like Yellowstone, and you go through the Teddy Roosevelt Arch, the Teddy Roosevelt Arch says, for the enjoyment and benefit of the people. What a wonderful idea, that our public lands are for our use. that access is for all Americans. And who are the stakeholders? Every American citizen is a stakeholder of our public lands. So I say this, I'm an optimist. President Trump wants to make America great again. And I don't think that message is a very bad message. And for those that know Vice President Mike Pence, I call him the Rock of Gibraltar when I'm not saying sir. But I'm an optimist. We have been blessed with a great nation. We have been blessed with great resources. We have been blessed with fertile lands. We've been blessed with our ability to practice our faith and the courage to say we are Christians. God bless America. So thanks for showing up. Let's do our duty. Thank you, and God bless.
Please welcome Centennial Institute 1776 scholar Katie Kellett.
Where was your family 5 generations ago? Perhaps living in a faraway land, making a voyage to America, or helping to form the early foundations of this country we cherish. Senator Cory Gardner is able to proudly proclaim that 5 generations ago, his family was not far from where we are now. On the eastern plains of Colorado, his family established a farm implement company in 1915 that is still in existence over a century later. With his strong roots in Colorado, he could not conceive of pursuing higher education anywhere other than his home state. Cory Gardner graduated summa cum laude from Colorado State University and obtained his law degree from the University of Colorado Boulder. In 2005, he was appointed to fill a vacancy in the Colorado House of Representatives, and a few months later, he was elected to fill the seat where he spent 2 years and acted as the minority whip. While serving as one of our representatives, he became known for his expertise in agricultural and natural resource policy. In 2010, Gardner was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, where he worked relentlessly on creating better energy initiatives using both traditional sources and renewable energy. In 2014, he was elected to the U.S. Senate, where he continues to work on energy legislation and serves as a member of the Senate Energy and Natural Resource Committee and a chairman of the Energy Subcommittee. As chairman of the Foreign Relations Subcommittee on East Asia, the Pacific, and International Cybersecurity Policy, Gardner has also worked to increase sanctions on North Korea, whose regime continues to abuse human rights. Although these policies are important to Cory Gardner, he is deeply committed to bettering his home state of Colorado and the people that live here through legislation that grows the economy and provides more jobs. Presently, Cory Gardner still calls home the house his great-grandparents built years ago, where he, his wife, and his 3 children live today. Now, would you please help me in welcoming Colorado Senator Cory Gardner.
Please welcome Colorado's own U.S. Senator, Cory Gardner.
How's everybody doing? How's the Western Conservative Summit going? It is great to see so many of you here tonight. It is great and an honor to be here with you. I've enjoyed coming to this each and every year, and I just truly appreciate the chance to be with you tonight. And I got to tell you something. I had this incredible experience yesterday. We're in Washington, D.C., voting in the Senate. It's 100 degrees outside. It's 100% humidity, at least that's what it felt like.
then you come back to Colorado, and as Ryan Zinke said, it is God's country, and we are grateful for it. Wasn't Secretary Zinke great? You know, I knew he was here. I knew he was here because I saw his horse tied up out front. I knew he was here. We're very grateful that he's here. I just hope that you gave him a very strong message, and that's simply this. There's something that I've been trying to pursue a little bit, and he's going to help us out with, I'm pretty sure. I would like to make sure that the Bureau of Land Management headquarters leaves Washington, D.C. and relocates itself to Grand Junction, Colorado. So, Secretary Zinke, I don't know if you're still here, but we would love to have you do that. You know, I'm here with my wife, Jamie, tonight. Our children, Allison, Thatcher, and Caitlin are here. I heard Katie give that great introduction. And I do live in this little tiny town of Yuma, Colorado. For those of you who aren't from Colorado, it's the place that the weatherman stands in front of on the newscast. It's out by Kansas. Hardly anybody knows where it is. But our son, he's 5.5. Our daughter, our youngest daughter, she's 2.5. And our oldest, she's 13. And, you know, our 5.5, he's getting more interested in politics. He's getting more interested in public policy and what's happening around him. And the other day, he was talking about some of the things that he was hearing on the radio. A TV commercial or a radio commercial went on, and it was talking about money or finances. And pretty soon he said something, well, Mommy, that's free. And Jamie thought, well, this is a good opportunity to share that, you know, really things aren't free. And that they do have costs associated with them. And so she said, you know what, Thatcher, things do cost. Things aren't free. In fact, the only thing that's free in life are love and hugs. To which point our son said, well, yeah, Mommy, except for the buy one, get things free things. The free things are free. So it's going to be a while before he's reading Hayek, but we're working on him. I had this incredible privilege yesterday of meeting with two incredible individuals in my office yesterday. A gentleman named Lauren Bruner. Gentleman named Donald Stratton. Now, some of you may know who these men are, but for those of you who don't, they are two of the 5 survivors of the USS Arizona from December 7th, 1941. They were in my office yesterday because they are still fighting one last incredible fight. Because the gentleman who saved their lives, a gentleman named Joe George, was never recognized for the act that saved those 2 and 4 others from that burning, listing USS Arizona. In fact, the story goes that Joe George, as he was piloting this ship named the Vestal toward the USS Arizona as it's tipped over, and Donald Stratton, he lives in Colorado Springs, he was at that very front tower of the USS Arizona that you remember from your history books that you've seen. He was in that tower. He was on fire. He was burning. He was heading out. And Joe George was given an order, cut the rope. And Joe George disobeyed a direct order. And he threw a line to the USS Arizona, and 6 men shimmied across that line. Hands burnt. Bodies burnt. They shimmied across that line, and he saved their lives. And so today they were at the White House to talk to the President of the United States about recognizing Joe George for that act of heroism. There are men and women in this room, though, who have stood up on the front lines of freedom time and time again for this nation. And we are grateful for your service. We are indebted to you. Several weeks ago, I had a meeting with Secretary Tillerson at the State Department. And prior to the meeting, we were looking at some of the rooms there in the diplomatic reception area. And there was this grandfather clock that stood in the diplomatic reception room at the State Department. And it was an old clock, and the history was written in a little plaque right by the clock. And it said this was a clock that was built in America's earliest years. The very first days this clock was built. It was built in the 1740s by an American clockmaker. It was in the homes of patriots, our forefathers, men and women over the last 200 years who listened to that clock count the hours, tick the seconds, mark the time. And as I was sitting there with Secretary Tillerson, I heard that clock chime 12 strokes for noon. But I wondered how many times in the past 200 years plus, 200 plus years of that clock's history, had it counted the time marked so slowly during times of conflict and war. Whose house was that clock in during the Revolutionary War, during the Civil War? What note did it strike during World War II, the Vietnam War? And were the people who were listening to that clock, did the people who were reading the face of that timepiece, did they ever think that it struck midnight for our country? Or did they always have the confidence that no matter what time of day or night this country would move forward, would move on? We face great challenges in this nation, tremendous struggles, because we are a great nation that faces tough times. But we know that we can continue to do good things. And you know what? Those two gentlemen from World War II, my guess is they'd be grateful that people can express their voices in this room tonight so that they can be heard, because that is what America is about. The voices of the people, to be heard, to be listened to. That's what makes a nation great, is the strength of each other to listen to the disparate voices, to listen to the people who have differing opinions, because that is what makes our nation strong. That is who we are. And those are the values that the Western Conservative Summit celebrates. Over the past 7 months, we have repealed $87 billion worth of regulations at the federal level. We have wiped out 54 million hours of paperwork off the backs of American families and businesses. And we have done everything that we can to make sure that we rebuild a failed foreign policy from 8 years of destruction under President Obama. Because when red lines are written in disappearing ink, the United States is weaker, and so are our allies. And together, we will make sure that we regain the strength, that freedom's foothold around the globe as a great nation. Next week, we are going to address the issue of health care in this country. And I note there are people here in this room who have very, very serious concerns about where that health care debate goes, as they have a very important stake in this debate. And that's why I've enjoyed having over 400 meetings this past several months with people from around the state to discuss health care. To some of the very people who are with us tonight, to make sure that we focus our health care efforts on those who need it the most. Because what has happened over the past several years is a government that has tried to grow so much that it's created instability in our most important safety net programs. And what we have to do is make sure that they are sustainable to protect those who are truly in need. In Colorado, 500,000 people had their health insurance plans canceled over the last several years. People across this country were promised that their health insurance rates would decrease by $2,500 a family. Remember that promise. But instead, the average American has seen their health insurance increase by over 105%. A broken promise. We've seen people who were promised they could keep their doctor if they wanted their doctor, but they lost their doctor. A broken promise. And what we have to do is we have to make sure that we can rebuild a healthcare system in this country that increases the quality of care, decreases the cost of care, and does it by giving consumers more choice, more options, and more freedom. and that we give the states flexibility they need to design a program that works best for them, to get Washington out of the way, to make sure that states can do what they know is best for their citizens. Those are the kinds of things that we can all work together to do. We need to make sure that we rein in the overrunning regulations that have destroyed so much of our economic opportunity over the last 8 years. We need to make sure that we pass legislation like the REINS Act to make sure that Congress has the power to check runaway federal agencies and bureaucracies. We need to make sure that we place judges on the federal court who won't make the law, but who will be guardians of the law. And we will make sure that whether it's the federal bench in Colorado, the federal bench across this great land, that the kind of men and women who will be confirmed by the United States Senate to serve in our court will be like Justice Neil Gorsuch. Over the next several weeks, we will turn from a healthcare debate upon making sure that we build a better system to tax reform, to cutting taxes from the highest corporate tax rate in the world so that we can grow this economy and start putting men and women back into better paying jobs so that they don't have to be reliant on safety net programs anymore. Look at the great state of Colorado, 2.3% unemployment. But not every part of this state shares in that same kind of opportunity. If you live in the eastern plains of Colorado where agriculture is struggling right now, if you live in the western slope of Colorado where the coal mines have been silent for too long, they haven't shared in that same economic growth. We know we can do better in this nation, and we know we must. And so over the coming months, we'll turn to tax reform. We'll turn to those ideas that we know can restore the greatness of this nation. The people in this room tonight, the people at the Western Conservative Summit, you are freedom's foot soldiers. Men and women who understand what it takes to make this country great, to continue the greatness of this nation, to make sure that those voices who disagree aren't ignored. They warmly embrace them through policies that empower the individual, not the government over the people. You know, it was years ago, some of you have heard me tell this story, a couple years ago now, that my grandfather passed away. And we were going through his house. My grandmother and grandfather were pretty much pack rats. They kept everything they ever had. And we were looking for some memorabilia to share with the family at that time. And we came across a shoebox that was filled with letters that he had written to his mom and dad during World War II, his time in Soissons, France. And those two gentlemen in my office yesterday, Lauren Bruner and Donald Stratton, those two veterans of World War II, reminded me of his story that was written in this letter. You see, this letter was dated August 15th, 1945, and for those of you who are students of history, you know why this date is important. The first sentence of his letter read like this. It said, "Aha! Last night at midnight, the rumors were confirmed. The war is over. There is peace at last. I said a silent prayer and know that I will be home with you soon." For those of you who have stood on the front lines of freedom for this country, you've held those silent prayers through battlefields and training, through long deployments and long phone calls with your families away from home. You know what it's like to share in that fight for freedom. And we will always be grateful for those men and women who have done that. But to Granddad, to Donald Stratton, to Lauren Bruner, to the men and women in this room, there was a question posed to all of us by John Adams hundreds of years ago that said this: will future generations of Americans deserve the freedoms that we have fought for? It's no doubt, after getting to know people like them, people like you, that the answer to John Adams' question will always be an unequivocal yes. Every American deserves the freedoms and liberties that this nation was founded on, that people have fought for, that people have died for, and that people today around the globe are standing up for. The conversations we have tonight in this room and tomorrow and the next day, this can't be it. We can't stop this conversation. We're here tonight not just because we know there are people who may believe in the same things we believe in. There's people here tonight because they know somebody who came and they wanted to go to a nice dinner and a nice event with nice speeches. But you're here for more than that. You're here because we know we have a fight ahead of us for the values of our country, for the greatness of this nation, to make sure that we uphold the promises to generations past and in the future. And so over the next several days, I hope that you leave this summit with an invigorated spirit, knowing that this nation truly is blessed, knowing that God has given this world something special in the United States of America. The Western Conservative Summit, the Centennial Institute, to its great founders like Bill Armstrong, to Jeff Hunt and John Andrews, thanks for making this possible. Thanks for being a part of this. And to all of you at the Western Conservative Summit, there's more work to be done. And in 2018, we're going to stand that work together. And we're going to make sure that wherever my granddad is, wherever your loved ones are, they will know that the United States stands stronger, bolder, and greater than ever. Thank you, Western Conservative Summit, and God bless. Thank you. Thank you.
Please welcome the amazing and wonderful Nicole Hunt.
Good evening. My name is Nicole Hunt, and it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, William Muma. Mr. Muma is the current president and chairman of the board of the Beckett Fund. He has served as a full-time volunteer in this role since 2011. Prior to joining Beckett, Mr. Muma had a 30-year career on Wall Street as CEO of Mitsubishi UFJ Securities USA, with prior roles as executive managing director and head of the equity division at Nomura Securities International. He was also partner and global head of derivatives at Bankers Trust Company. Mr. Muma currently serves as a trustee at the Witherspoon Institute. He has degrees from Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service and Columbia University Business School. Mr. Muma lives in Summit, New Jersey with his wife, Kathy, to whom he has been happily married since 1983. They have 6 children and 7, soon to be 8, grandchildren. Please help me welcome Mr. Muma to the Western Conservative Summit.
Please welcome the president and chairman of the board for the Beckett Fund, William Muma.
So good evening. You know, with that opening, I was afraid I'd have to come here and sing. But then when I listened carefully to Jeff's voice, I realized I could probably meet that standard. I have a good voice. What are you laughing for? So I don't know how I got lucky enough to have Nicole give me the intro. I was pleased when I saw that and pleased when I spoke to her earlier today. But then when I saw her beautiful children on the video, I really felt like I won the prize. So thank you. You know, a year makes a huge difference. Last year, my colleague from the Beckett Fund, Christina Arriaga, she spoke at this conference. And at the time, Beckett's fight for religious liberty looked considerably different. Now, it'd be natural if you think I was talking about the change in the White House, but I'm not. I'm speaking instead about a very profound change that has taken place with the American people. And behind this surprising change, I think you can find a child, a canary, and a carpenter. So the child is the hero in the Hans Christian Andersen fable, The Emperor's New Clothes. So many of you probably know the story. It's a story of a vain and arrogant king who's abused the power of his office. He believes he's smarter than his people. And he's surrounded by ideologues and cynics, and he issues by pen and by phone an endless stream of executive orders and mandates. Now, as the story goes, the king is sold a suit of clothes by crony capitalists. Holding up their empty hands, they tell the king that only the sophisticated elites can see this new outfit. Only those who are woke. But gratifyingly, they tell the king, his suit is invisible to the deplorables. Well, when the emperor sold this suit by his aides, parades before his subjects, he looks ridiculous. But here's the interesting thing. No one dares admit the truth. They're afraid it would make them racist or homophobic or bigoted. And then finally, an innocent child cries out, "Look, the king is naked." And the people laugh despite their fear. And that laughter, which is contagious, turns their fear to courage, and it inspires them to take the power back from the king. Interesting, isn't it? This story goes all the way back to Hans Christian Andersen, and I read that it goes back hundreds and hundreds of years before that. Human nature doesn't change. What's at the heart of the story? The child is the hero because he has the courage and simplicity to say out loud what is true. And that's the change that has swept our country. The American people have shed their fear, and they are ready to regain the rights stolen from them by our out-of-bounds government. Religious liberty is central to this drama, and the canary and the carpenter are my ways of showing you why that's the case. So for nearly 60 years, there's been a struggle between the elites and the people. The secular elite believes social harmony requires an inversion of the First Amendment, a shift away from freedom of religion into freedom from religion. But the faith of the people has never allowed them to pursue that in the legislature. So the elites have pushed this through the courts. Year by year, progressive law professors and judges took more seats in the legal academy and on the bench. And then case by case, religious freedom was redefined and limited. And these years witnessed the stripping of religion from the public square. Religion was effectively banned from our schools, our hospitals, our workplaces. But Americans hardly put up a fight. It seems no single decision by the court, no single case could galvanize public opinion. The fight was too incremental. The issues seemed too technical. And under the cover of court order neutrality, our religious freedom was dying. Neutrality sounded so tolerant, but it's not. Neutrality in religion and religious liberty is like that poison gas that was the bane of coal miners in the old days. It's odorless, it's colorless, but it's fatal. And the coal miners took to bringing canaries down in the mines. And the canaries were more sensitive to the gas, and their reaction served as a warning to the miners. And that's what the religious liberty fight needed. It needed its canaries. It needed some way to highlight the danger to the country and to sound the alarm. So I'll contend the answer came in the early 90s with the founding of the Becket Fund, a brave man named Seamus Hassan, and Alliance Defending Freedom. And finally, with these public interest law firms, there was a coherent, consistent legal response to the encroachment by the courts. For the next 15 years, the Becket Fund won a string of precedent-setting legal cases. Victories like, when I see the opening here, Becket Fund won the victories all the way to the Supreme Court to keep under God and the Pledge of Allegiance. Our win record over these years and up to the president was over 95%. It was truly God's hand at work to see those victories. and the courtroom victories served their purpose. Religious leaders and conservative thinkers grew increasingly aware of the threat to religious liberty from the courts. But that awareness wasn't broad enough. There was no public reaction, no widespread sense of crisis. And for those who were fighting actively for religious liberty, it seemed the people would never wake up. But I'll tell you, the wake-up call came in 2008, when the progressive left stripped off its mask. After 60 years of the left patiently using the courts to dismantle religious liberty, the Obama administration decided to speed things up, and it deployed the immense power of the executive branch. And I have to tell you, a few years into his presidency, you didn't need to be a professor of constitutional law to see the threat to religious liberty in this country. I could take the entire evening cataloging the many abuses of religious freedom over those 8 years, but I'm going to just keep it to 2. The first is the contraceptive mandate issued shortly after Obamacare became law. Here, the government demanded every organization provide, through its insurance, abortion-inducing drugs to their employees, regardless of their religious convictions. Now, the Becket Fund fought this all the way to the Supreme Court. We won a decisive victory for private businesses with the courageous Green family of Hobby Lobby. Well, that victory won by the Greens set the stage for the Becket Fund to take the Little Sisters of the Poor through a long battle all the way to the Supreme Court, and there to win a victory for all religious ministries. You know, but the administration was unfazed, and they actually escalated their assault on religious freedom. You'd be forgiven for missing this because it was in the fog of the election year that doctors were commanded by the government to perform gender transition procedures on any child referred by a mental health professional. And doctors who refused for religious reasons or even for concerns of medical safety could lose their jobs, and hospitals could lose their license. So thankfully, before this outrage could take effect, the Becket Fund won a nationwide injunction, and we halted its implementation at the turn. But I have to tell you, the ideology of the enemies of religion and religious liberty are revealed in these 2 examples. Just consider the extreme nature of these mandates, and consider as well the innocence of their targets. These are children, these are nuns. I have to tell you, the courts might have been chipping away at religious freedom for all those years, but the Obama administration took a sledgehammer to it. But that 95% win record that I mentioned was our training ground. It prepared the Becket Fund to meet the dramatic assault waged by the left. And as a consequence, in the last 5 years, we have gone to the Supreme Court 6 times and won 6 victories. This contest between the Goliath of government power and the David of small law firms might seem like an uneven contest until we remember the force multiplier, which is truth. The power of the innocent to say openly that the emperor is naked. And of course, this is where the carpenter enters the story. So 2,000 years ago, Friday morning, Jesus stood before Pontius Pilate, and Pilate asked our Lord, "What is truth?" And Pilate's sneering question is a mask for his fear, because no man, no matter how arrogant or how powerful, is immune to God's voice, and God always calls us to truth. And religion is fundamentally a quest for truth, and religious liberty is the legal right to answer God's call. And answering that call takes courage. Jesus didn't walk away from his interview with Pilate. His crucifixion followed. And it's been the same ever since. Every fight for truth is only won when Christians find the courage to be martyrs. In our time, that role fell to the Little Sisters of the Poor. This order of nuns, who care selflessly for the elderly poor, were the target of that mandate. And at first, they couldn't even believe it was true. They couldn't believe that their government would force them to violate their religious beliefs or pay millions of dollars in fines. Now, the government's sophisticated lawyers said the nuns were wrong about their religious faith, that the Little Sisters could sign a paper and that someone else would commit the sin. The paper meant nothing, just a signature. But the nuns knew better. They knew you cannot dress up a lie in an invisible suit of clothes and call it the truth. And the Little Sisters stood firm. The mandate was wrong, the accommodation was a lie, the emperor had no clothes. And the sisters refused to yield. They answered God's call. And their courage did not go unnoticed. The American people saw it, and I think it was at that moment that the crowd realized that the power of the emperor is an illusion. Our people, the American people, have changed. They lost their fear. And I see it everywhere I travel for the Becket Fund. The people know something is wrong, and they want change. Now, the Obama administration is gone. That's a good start. President Trump campaigned pledging his support for religious liberty, and he hosted the Little Sisters of the Poor in the Rose Garden. So maybe the fight is over. But no. Recall the fight began decades before Obama. And during those long years, the fight was in the courts. And it is in the courts that the fight has to end. So Becket will wage that legal fight, and I'm telling you, we will win. And there's three readily understandable reasons. The first is, after 8 years of head-to-head fighting with the government, we're tough and we're capable. We know how to win even when the odds are against us. But second, those Supreme Court victories I mentioned and others won by good firms like the ADF, they set powerful precedents. And those precedents are the foundation for further legal work that we will build on. But third, the judiciary is changing, like Senator Gardner mentioned. Supreme Court Justice Gorsuch is a powerful signal of presidential intent. But keep looking, because his nomination has been matched by equally impressive nominations to the other federal courts. And with court vacancies at historical highs and the likelihood of many retirements in the coming years, the judiciary will be transformed. So these three factors of a strong, sophisticated legal advocates like my firm, powerful precedents to build on, and a court that's returning to constitutional integrity, those are encouraging. But it's still the courage of the people that's essential. So I would suggest everyone in this room has a role to play. 1, 2, 3. First, we have to support courageous Americans like the Green family and the Little Sisters of the Poor. When they stand and fight, we have to stand with them. And second, we have to urge our political leaders to keep religious freedom a priority. But most of all, each of us, need to restore truth to its proper place. We have to follow this example of the Little Sisters of the Poor. We have to follow the example of our Lord and face the cynics who deny truth. Each of us have to be willing to take up that cross. I have tremendous confidence in the religious heart of the American people, and I believe if we place our trust in God, He will continue to bless this country, and we will see religious liberty restored to its place as the foundational liberty of our republic. Thank you so much.
Please welcome KNUS radio host, Jimmy Sengenberger.
Good evening. My name is Jimmy Sengenberger, and for those who don't know me, I'm a radio host on Denver 710 KNUS and 1690 KDMT. You know, some people are known for their intellectual flair. Others are known for their achievements. And some are known for their mustache. Our next speaker, Ambassador John Bolton, is known for all three. Whether it's representing the United States on the world stage or sounding the alarm about the grave threats we face as Americans, former UN Ambassador John Bolton has dedicated his career to acting on behalf of the American people and offering a rare dose of cool reason into the public discussion. Today, Ambassador Bolton is like Paul Revere on the erroneous Iran deal, letting everyone know the failures of Iran to keep up its part of the bargain and the dangers of allowing Iranian intransigence to fester. This is a call we must heed, and a call I'm almost certain Ambassador Bolton will make this evening. It is my honor to welcome to the stage Ambassador John Bolton.
Please welcome Ambassador John Bolton.
Thank you very much. Well, it's a great pleasure to be here this evening in Denver at the Western Conservative Summit. It's just, I think, a critical activity to gather people together. And I think the timing could not be better, as we're almost exactly at the 6-month anniversary of President Trump's inauguration, the new Congress coming in January. So it gives us an opportunity, I think, to review what has happened these past 6 months and see a little bit about what has been accomplished and perhaps even more importantly, what has not been accomplished. Now, I understand that there are a lot of critical domestic policy issues that people are concerned about, and rightly so. What are we going to do finally with Obamacare? What are we going to do about tax reform and tax cuts to help stimulate the economy? What are we going to do to get the federal government's role in education reduced to where it should be, which in my view is pretty close to zero? There are a lot of critical issues of domestic policy that deserve our attention. But my view is that if the safety of the country is at risk, all of the other issues are secondary. And that's why when President Trump took office, he inherited a country that was very much at risk around the world in geographical region after geographical region, on one substantive policy issue after another. The last administration had weakened America, had reduced our position in the world, had turned inward, and had left the world as a result in a more chaotic state, varying from region to region. But the fact was, the last administration believed that a strong American presence in the world caused more instability than it prevented, that it was America that was the provocative actor in the world, and that sundry terrorists and nuclear proliferators and other adversaries of ours were just reacting to the United States. This is like looking through the wrong end of a telescope. It's not American strength that's provocative, it's American weakness that's provocative. And that was the task that the new administration faced. Several significant things have been done. The president proposed a significant increase in the military budget over the last Obama administration planning figure, and the House of Representatives looks set in the next days to authorize an even greater increase in the budget. Now, make no mistake, I'm a strong believer in reducing and eliminating deficits in the federal budget, but I think what we need to do in building up the military doesn't mean that we're going to have larger deficits. It just means there are more wasteful domestic programs that are going to have to be cut even more. So simply changing the debate on the level of military readiness that we need,
recreating, reestablishing the national missile defense system that the George W. Bush administration began to protect us against rogue nations' nuclear weapons programs, rebuilding the Navy to a suitable level. The list is long, and this one budget will not solve all the problems. But if you had to pick one single thing that this administration has done that will last on into the future, it's reshaping the military. That task has just begun, but everything else depends on that. I can tell you as a diplomat, there's nothing more persuasive in diplomatic negotiations than the strength of the American military. You can't have a strong foreign policy without a strong defense policy. Now, on specific tasks, I think the President made it clear during his last campaign that the threat of radical Islamic terrorism was at the top of the list. One of the most significant things he did was call it radical Islamic terrorism, because he was showing that what we face is a hostile ideology. We don't face idiosyncratic acts of individuals who somehow, through some form of spontaneous combustion, turn from being average people one day into being terrorists the next. They are motivated by an ideology that's hostile to our very way of life. And understanding that is the first step to overcome it. We are finally beginning to make progress against the ISIS caliphate in Syria and Iraq. We can look forward to the day when ISIS is defeated there. But let's be clear, the destruction of ISIS does not, in Syria and Iraq, does not mean the end of ISIS worldwide. The threat that ISIS and a resurgent al-Qaeda pose all around the Middle East and really all around the world will continue. And that threat won't go away by imagining that it doesn't happen. This threat we've seen manifested in Europe and the United States on too many occasions. This is not the time to let our guard down, even as we see ISIS losing ground in its so-called caliphate. This threat, which we ignored at our peril for far too long, is going to require a long international struggle. We didn't ask for this. We don't want it. We just as soon not have to worry about it. But if you believe in the safety of Americans here at home, it's a struggle we have to continue to engage in. And I think it's very closely related to the threat of nuclear proliferation, related in several respects, not least of which because one of the most significant dangers we face is from the Ayatollahs in Iran, who are not only continuing to pursue nuclear weapons despite Barack Obama's 2015 agreement with them to give that program up. They have been, since the Islamic Revolution of 1979, the world's central banker of international terrorism. They have funded Sunni and Shia terrorists alike, and they continue to do it today. Moreover, we've just seen in North Korea the progress that they've made during the last 8 years toward their decades-long objective of getting deliverable nuclear weapons. On the 4th of July, they launched what our analysts judge to be an intercontinental ballistic missile, probably capable of hitting Alaska. It caught us by surprise because our intelligence with respect to North Korea is far from what it should be. North Korea, the poorest nation in Asia, has detonated 5 nuclear devices. Many people think they're on the brink of a 6th nuclear device. And when they get the capability to reach the United States, it won't just be a threat from North Korea. Iran will be able to get exactly the same capability simply by writing North Korea a check. They have worked together on ballistic missiles for 25 years, if not more. They've almost certainly worked together on their nuclear programs. And the risk that they're not going to wait to have a ballistic missile that's capable of hitting the United States. They could give a nuclear device to a terrorist group. They could put it on a tramp steamer and sail it into any harbor around the world. They could dismantle the device, smuggle it across our southern border, and reassemble it in an American city. Terrorist group would love to get that capability. Iran would be happy to pay for it, and North Korea would be happy to give them the device. This threat that we face is not something that we heard much about in the past years. And we've been reminded of it really recently only because of that North Korean test. The president, I think, understands the nuclear threat as the most imminent danger for the United States. I think he is resolved to ensure that neither Iran nor North Korea nor anybody else gets a nuclear weapons capability. But he is still hamstrung by the national security bureaucracy. And just this week, we saw an example of how the permanent government in Washington works. When the president was confronted with no options by the bureaucracy other than to certify that Iran is complying with the 2015 nuclear deal. Now, the evident fact is that Iran is not complying with the 2015 nuclear deal. It has enriched uranium above the permitted levels. It has produced heavy water above the permitted levels. German law enforcement has reported on several occasions detecting Iranian efforts to procure ballistic missile, nuclear-related, and dual-use technology illegally in Germany. And many, many facilities in Iran remain completely off limits to international inspectors. This deal that Obama signed isn't constraining Iran from getting nuclear weapons. It's facilitating Iran getting nuclear weapons. It unfroze between $100 and $150 billion of assets for Iran to use for terrorism or nuclear weapons or anything else, and it allowed European and American firms to engage in business transactions with them that will benefit Iran's economy enormously. This deal needs to be brought to a stop. The United States needs to close it down. Now, some say, well, but, you know, our allies will be upset. The job of the President of the United States is to keep Americans safe, period, close quote. How do you handle allies that are upset? You send your diplomats out and say, this is what we're doing, it's in our interest, it's in your interest, and here are the reasons why. You don't have the allies dictate to you what the policy is. You tell the allies the United States is leading again, follow us. This is what I think the president wants to do, and as soon as they get control of the bureaucracy, that's what I think he'll try and do. But it shows that for us as citizens, it's not enough just to win elections. To get policy implemented, you have to stay on top of it. You have to work with your members of Congress. They, in turn, have to apply pressure on the administration, and it's a continuous, unending job. But if we don't do it, it leaves the country more at risk. And we can see this not just in the areas of terrorism and nuclear proliferation, although they are the most immediate threats to us and to our friends around the world. There are long-term strategic threats as well. One of them is the regime in China. We can see what they're doing today in the East China Sea and the South China Sea. Do you know the Chinese have declared the South China Sea to be a Chinese province? They have a provincial capital. You've seen pictures in your newspapers that they've taken rocks and reefs that are on a good day are about 3 inches above the water, built islands on them, and on those islands they've put air and naval facilities. They are militarizing the South China Sea. They're trying to take these international waters and make them into a Chinese lake. And if they do that, they will have their hands around the throat of the economies of Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. Every barrel of oil that goes through the South China Sea to those countries from the Middle East will be at risk. Nearly 1/3 of all seaborne commercial traffic in the world goes through the South China Sea. And under the last administration, we essentially watched it happen. We watched our Navy go down to a level of ships at sea, roughly 285, the smallest number since 1916. Most of our astute military observers think we need a Navy of 355 ships. So you can see we've got a long way to go. But we have to demonstrate to China that the South China Sea is not going to belong to them, nor is the island of Taiwan going to fall into their hands, this vibrant democracy. That's been a friend of America's for so many years. I think, in fact, that it's time to simply eliminate what has long been called the one China policy. This is a policy that actually says Chinese on both sides of the Taiwan Straits believe there is only one China. But the fact is, there's a reality today that there's one China and one Taiwan. And I don't think we ought to be shy about saying that. I would favor giving diplomatic recognition to Taiwan as a message to China. And to show that the United States is in East Asia. We've been there since 1945. We have provided stability and peace and security when that was possible, and we're not going to be pushed out. That's a signal to everybody in that part of the world that the United States can be relied on. And we also face strategic threats from Russia. And let's be very clear about this. The evidence is unmistakable that Russia tried to interfere in our elections. I think there's no evidence that the Trump campaign colluded with the Russians. These are two different issues. But I think we have to say unmistakably to the Russians, as I believe the president just did at the G20 meeting to Vladimir Putin, we believe that efforts to interfere in America's elections constitute an existential threat to the idea of America. We are an exceptional country because we are the only country founded on the idea of individual liberty and control over our government. And when the Constitution is interfered with by anyone, particularly by foreigners, we consider that an act of war. And what that means is that for the Russians or the Chinese or anyone else, for any cyber warfare programs that may exist around the world, we need to show that there is a big cost to interfering in American elections. And I don't mean just a monetary cost. I mean to create structures of deterrence to convince our adversaries never to try it again. They need to feel more than comparable pain to what they tried to do to us. Because only if we are willing to protect our elections can we count on their integrity. We have enough threats to them domestically. We don't need any more from overseas. And I think the Russians and everyone else need to understand that. Now, there's one final issue here that I think that President Trump, perhaps more than any recent president, appreciates. He's talked about it in a variety of different contexts. This is also, to me, an existential matter for America, basic to our Constitution. And that is that unlike the Obama years, where there were constant references to international law and the superiority of international law, I think we're going to make it clear in this administration that as far as temporal, secular matters on earth here are concerned, that when we look at international law, we're going to make it clear that on this earth there is no authority for Americans higher than the U.S. Constitution. We didn't create this country to share sovereignty with others. We didn't create it to put our sovereignty into international institutions or international agreements, however well motivated they seem to be. We're actually quite capable of governing ourselves. Thank you very much. So I think what's important here in this 6-month point, with 3.5 years left, is that we say to the government in Washington, well done for what you've accomplished so far, but you've got an awful lot of work still to do. You've got to continue to roll back the mistakes of the Obama administration. You've got to deter America's enemies, and you've got to stand up for American values and interests. Thank you very much.
Please welcome Centennial Institute 1776 scholar, Kaylin Mazel.
Good evening. No matter how controversial it might seem in today's day and age, Katie Pavlich has never been one to shy away from the truth. After receiving her degree in broadcast journalism from the University of Arizona, Katie continued her trajectory in the pursuit of making goodness fashionable by gaining credibility as a truly investigative journalist. A journalist who, counter to the popular tide, does not simply accept unfounded and potentially dangerous assumptions, but rather she challenges them. Her ability to think critically, take a stand, and to advocate has vastly set her apart in the world of today's media, making her a sought-after voice for conservatives, for women, and for Americans. This brought her to our nation's capital, where she became the editor for townhall.com, as well as the contributing editor to the Town Hall magazine. In the summer of 2013, she became a guest co-host for The Five on the Fox News channel, where she was also a contributor. She now serves as a rotating host on their show, Outnumbered. Katie Pavlich is a fellow at the National Review Washington, has shared her perspective on multiple media venues, including CNN, MSNBC, CNBC, and Fox Business, in addition to numerous national and local radio shows. She's a regular speaker on college campuses all over the country and is also the author of 2 books, The Fast and Furious, Barack Obama's Bloodiest Scandal and Its Shameless Cover-Up, as well as Assault and Flattery, The Truth About the Left and Their War on Women. She was the recipient of the 2013 Blogger of the Year Award at CPAC, the 2013 Conservative Leadership Award at the Claire Booth Luce Policy Institute, as well as their 2014 Woman of the Year Award. I am beyond excited and honored to introduce to you an incredibly intelligent, outspoken, and credentialed speaker. And please welcome Katie Pavlich.
Please welcome townhall.com editor, Katie Pavlich.
What's up? I see some old friends in the front row here. Good to see you. And hello to the Western Conservative Summit. And hello, Colorado. It is such a pleasure and an honor to be here with all of you, especially at the base of the Rocky Mountains in downtown Denver. I mean, what could be better? As a kid, growing up in Arizona, I spent a lot of time in the state camping with my family. And I'm always really grateful to come back west. So thank you to the Centennial Institute and Colorado Christian University for having me and for putting on such an amazing conference for all of you where you can be with like-minded people. And I also think they deserve a lot of credit for all of the young people who are here. And I love seeing that it's not just college students who are here, which is incredibly important, but also high school students from across the country are here. So yay for that. Good job. So it's been a few years now since I moved from Arizona, where I'm from, to Washington, D.C. to pursue my dream of working in conservative media. And now let me tell you, working in D.C. is everything people tell you about. It's dirty, it's hot, it's humid, Metro's usually broken. It's full of pressure and, of course, lots of politics. I always joke about how working in the nation's capital is like dog years. One feels like 7 because you pack so much into a day that it just feels like yesterday was a month ago. And especially with this administration. Did you see the news today? Because it wasn't what I was expecting for today, and yesterday, and every day. And as someone who's new to the White House press corps, no day is the same, and certainly we don't suffer from boredom or an uninteresting storyline. There are, of course, lots of perks to the job, and moments that I find give me a daily reminder of gratitude. Little and new things that I keep noticing when I go to the White House on a pretty regular basis. The Marines standing guard, for example, right where President Trump comes out to greet his foreign guests. The protesters who inevitably are there outside on a daily basis with one cause or another. The Secret Service dogs and their agent handlers working to keep the place safe. And we're always wondering when the next fence jumper is coming and hope that it doesn't happen. And of course, the rumbling of Air Force or of Marine One landing on the South Lawn can't be heard anywhere else in the world. And being able to attend Rose Garden press conferences with the world's most respected, and some not so respected, leaders is pretty amazing. And even when their motorcade shut down traffic, there's still a sense of pride about them visiting America. And of course, being a conservative in the press corps makes things all the more interesting. Considering this room is full of politically astute individuals, House of Cards is probably a familiar television show. Any of you know about House of Cards? A few of you? I often get the question, is House of Cards real? Is it an accurate portrayal of the way that Washington works? And I get the impression that people asking me this question want me to say, no, it's totally not like that. But being an honest person, I always tell them, oh, if you think House of Cards is bad, you have no idea. But that's the nature of government, and despite the accuracy of the swamp or the bubble labels, we still live in the greatest country on earth, and every day we are proud to be Americans, whether we live in Colorado or in Washington, D.C., or wherever else we might be from. The realities and pressures of Washington also make coming back to and home to and relying on principle even more important. This is the Western Conservative Summit, and I think there are a few things that the East Coast, specifically Washington, can learn from Western values which easily couple with conservative beliefs. So, to start, it's the Wild West. You better buckle up and bring your boots and put your chaps on, because there's gonna be a lot of you-know-what to walk through. I wear my cowgirl boots around Washington, D.C. all of the time, and it's not just because I'm from the West and I like to make a fashion statement every now and then, but it's because I'm dodging the proverbial scorpions, cactus, snakes on a regular basis that tend to dwell in the swamps of Washington, D.C. And one of my favorite sayings has always been, life is tough, my dear, and I suggest you get a really cute helmet because the ride is worth it. But another thing that you can learn from Western values that can translate to Washington, D.C. is getting the hard work done early, because there's always more work to do. Anyone who's ever worked on a ranch knows that's true. Keeping your word, because if you don't deliver on a promise, people will remember, and trust is a very difficult thing to regain once it is lost. Congress, I hope, is listening, because I seem to remember lots of promises and words about the repeal of Obamacare. And yet, we still haven't seen as much progress, I think, as we should. A little humility goes a long way. Standing in the middle of Rocky Mountain Park is similar to standing at the edge of the ocean. It's big, it's vast, and it makes you feel humble, which is a good thing. That feeling can be applied to other parts of life, not just standing in the middle of the wilderness. It's about taking on big challenges and knowing it's possible. And now, I know when it comes to politicians, this is a lot to ask, But taking a step back to listen and consider new ideas and policy proposals in a humble way paves a path for true and much-needed government reform. Sometimes the trail will be long with a few unexpected storms along the way, but putting the hard work in without taking a shortcut always gets to a better end result. Personal responsibility, we know, is crucial to long-term survival and, quite frankly, to pursuing a fulfilled life. Making decisions for yourself, being your own personal leader, is a much better way to live than having someone else making decisions for you, especially big government bureaucrats in a city far away. Be a good neighbor, but mind your own business. Most importantly, freedom should be the foundation on which we govern. Less is certainly more. And finally, as the old saying goes, don't be all hat and no cowboy. And don't be an empty suit either. There are many lessons to be learned, but it's important to remember the positive and the progress of this country far outweighs the negative. I think oftentimes we get caught up in the things that are wrong when a lot of things are actually going right. Every day is a battle against leftism and forces who want to limit our freedoms, but it's a battle we fight and a battle that we're actually winning. Across the country, conservative principles are winning at the ballot box, whether it's school choice, the Second Amendment, labor union reform, business deregulation, and so much more. And this is because we reject the idea that if you surround yourself with a safe space, you'll be successful in life and we promote true tolerance by being open to ideas opposed to our own so we know what we stand for and what we believe in. We understand that the free exchange of ideas without fear of consequence is a core American value, so important that it is enshrined in the Constitution and has been broadly reaffirmed by the Supreme Court for decades. We believe that the next generations deserve a future without burdensome debt and limited career choices. We believe that anyone, regardless of race, background, or circumstances, has the ability to pursue the American dream, so long as they are able and allowed to pursue their own freedom and opportunities. We reject the government limiting liberty that belongs to those who are destined to succeed. When you do, thank you. When you do a Google search of the American dream, this is the definition that you will find. The American dream is a national ethos of the United States, a set of ideals in which freedom includes the opportunity for prosperity and success, and an upward social mobility for the family and children achieved through hard work in a society with few barriers. I know every single person in this room believes in the American dream because you've lived it. Your children have lived it, your neighbors have lived it, your friends have lived it. I certainly believe in the American dream because I'm living it right now in so many different ways. The American dream can mean so many different things to different people, and that's the beauty of it, and it's customizable by the individual. It means having options and defending your own future, but requires a person to be responsible for their own path and the decisions that they make along the way. So as we move away from years of economic devastation and into a positive and booming economic future under a new administration, the American dream has a bright road ahead for anybody who chooses to pursue it. And as Margaret Thatcher said, the facts of life are conservative, and she was right. Conservative principles have led this country through good times and bad, and will continue to do so as long as we fight for them and stress their importance. And to quote Teddy Roosevelt, since we are in the West, and I know that Secretary Zinke was here earlier, so maybe he did this too, we have fallen heirs to the most glorious heritage a people ever received, and each one of us must do his part if we wish to show that the nation is worthy of its good fortune. That's absolutely true. The conservative future and the future of America are bright because of every person in this room, because of the people who make this country the most incredible nation on earth. Not because the government makes it great, but because the people and individuals who live here make it great. And that's because, after all, we're all endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. whether you live in the West or in the East. Keep up the good work, keep fighting the good fight, and thank you so much for being here.
Please welcome Centennial Institute 1776 scholar, Mikhail Jaco.
In the words of our next speaker, college campuses have become islands of totalitarianism and intolerance. But Charlie Kirk is working to fix that. At the young age of 17, Charlie Kirk founded Turning Point USA, a national student movement dedicated to identifying, organizing, and empowering young people to promote the principles of free markets, fiscal responsibility, and limited government. Since its inception on June 5th of 2012, Charlie has grown Turning Point USA from nothing to having representation on over 1,200 high school and college campuses nationwide, and over 150 full-time staff. Turning Point USA has even gone international by expanding all the way into Canada by opening a branch called Turning Point Canada. Every year, Turning Point hosts conferences for women, high schoolers, Latinos, leaders on campuses, and more. Charlie Kirk's goal is to build the most active and powerful conservative grassroots activist network for students in the country. And so far, Charlie Kirk's hard work has paid off, because currently, Turning Point is the largest and fastest growing youth organization in America. At 23 years old, he has appeared on Fox News, CNBC, and the Fox Business News over 200 times. He is also a best-selling author of the book Time for a Turning Point, and was the youngest speaker at the 2016 Republican National Convention, and a proud Eagle Scout. Please help me welcoming Charlie Kirk.
Please welcome the founder and executive director of Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be with all of you tonight. I come from Chicago, Illinois. Anyone from Illinois, Chicago? The fun thing about being from Illinois is we have term limits, a little bit different than most states. 1 term in office, 1 term in jail. When we ask for our former governor's cell number, we actually mean his cell number. My grandmother was a lifelong Republican from the north side of Chicago, knocked on doors for decades. She passed away in the mid-90s, and she's been voting Democrat ever since. I grew up 20 minutes down the street from where Hillary Clinton went to high school, 30 minutes down the street from the Barack Obama for America headquarters. So you might say, what is a guy like you doing here at the Western Conservative Summit, starting a national student activist organization? Well, I started Turning Point USA when I was 18 years old, and I found myself to be a conservative because when you're surrounded by people that you disagree with, you're going to find what you believe very, very quickly. And in the trenches, you have to either fight or flee, and boy, did I argue with a lot of teachers and a lot of people throughout the years, and I found that this generation, my generation, I'm 23 years old, is one that can embrace freedom, that can understand these values, that does not have to fall victim to Bernie Sanders-style socialism, and that with the right outreach and with the right organization, we can win back the future. And that is exactly what our organization does every single day. Just this summer, we're keeping quite a pace. We hosted the nation's largest young women's leadership summit for over 1,000 young women across the country. We just wrapped up our Young Latino Leadership Summit this week in Vegas. We have our High School Leadership Summit coming up next week. We had our Chapter Leadership Summit last week. We're adding 30 new staffers next month. But you know what? College campuses are the new battleground, because the left, they know they've lost politically, but the one thing they've only gained territory on is on our college campuses. And it is the most important fight today, other than all the political fight. And by the way, is anyone else like really upset at Congress right now? I mean, I could not be more disappointed than them. I'm just going to speak honestly. I mean, I run into senators here and there, and I just look at them and I say, I'm so disappointed. what are you doing all day long? I mean, seriously. I mean, who here worked and knocked on doors, made phone calls so that they would repeal Obamacare? Then I have to hear about 5 senators that don't have the backbone to say what they said they were going to do. Are you kidding me? I mean, am I alone here? I mean, this is, for years, for 7 years, we had to hear, we're going to repeal Obamacare. Just give us the House. We gave them the House. Well, we need the Senate. We gave them the Senate. Oh, we need the White House. Now they have all 3 chambers, and we're hearing nothing but excuses. And what makes me the most sick looking at Washington, D.C., is that the people who voted for a full repeal of Obamacare only did it because they knew Obama was going to veto it. They lied to us. They lied to us. They didn't actually mean it. And so I'm totally disgusted with what's going on in Congress. Excuse my candid, extemporaneous comments. I'm just so sick and tired of these people going to Washington, say they're going to do something, and not doing it. Anyway, my passion every single day, I live in America, I don't live in Washington, D.C. I work on college campuses because I love working with 18, 19, and 20-year-olds that want to hear about history, want to hear about freedom, and they're able to be persuaded when presented with these ideas and these values and these arguments. It's entirely possible, it's actually more than likely, for a student to go to one of the best schools in the country, Stanford, Princeton, Yale, Harvard, and not hear one good thing about a conservative idea for more than 10 minutes throughout their 4 years. Think about that. It is more than entirely possible to go through one of the best schools in America and not hear one good thing about a conservative idea for more than 10 minutes over 4 years. Think about how sick that is, that you pay $200,000 to go get a political science degree and you can't articulate the other side and the other perspective. And so over the last 5 years, as we've grown Turning Point USA to more and more campuses, we've come to the realization that the left hates the idea that there are other ideas. Think about that. They hate the idea that there are other ideas. The most intolerant people in the world are those that preach tolerance, right? They're the ones on college campuses saying, we have to be tolerant of other ideas. Yet they are the most intolerant people that I've ever come across. And they say they stand for diversity. At UC Berkeley, they have 13. UC Berkeley's a mess, unbelievable. They have 13 full-time people dedicated to diversity every single day. But their definition of diversity is just racial and ethnic diversity, not the most important type of diversity, which is intellectual diversity, which is diversity of thought. See, I challenge my liberal counterparts on campus, and I say, if conservative ideas were so bad, wouldn't you want as many conservative speakers as possible because they'll all just fall flat on their face and no one will follow them and everyone will think that's stupid? The left is threatened by our value system. They're threatened because they know when students are able to hear free enterprise ideas, the Constitution, that things actually end up more 50-50. And in fact, they end up more on the center right. So what the left has created or what I call islands of totalitarianism on our college campuses. The greatest threat to Western civilization is what is going on our college campuses. I cannot overstate the threat of what is going on with the assault on free speech, the absolute silencing of opposition of ideas. So let's go through a little crash course. And again, I will not dive into hyperbole. You might think I'm making this up. We're going to talk about 4 things very quickly. Microaggressions, trigger warnings, safe spaces, and free speech zones. Again, I will not even have to dive into hyperbole because the truth will seem exaggerated. Let's talk about microaggressions. Anyone know what a microaggression? Ever heard of that before? On a microaggression is, on a college campus, if you say something to a fellow student or teacher that you don't mean to be offensive, but could have come across as offensive to certain individuals, therefore that statement or sentence or word must be disallowed or not allowed. So, the sentence, in America, if you work hard enough, you can succeed, is considered to be a microaggression against immigrant students because that's offensive to them. I'm not kidding. The statement, illegal immigrants, is a microaggression against all people of Latino background or culture. You cannot say the term radical Islamic terrorism because that is a microaggression, which brings me to the next one, which is a trigger warning. A trigger warning is you have to give aforementioned notice to students on a college campus before you say certain words or phrases or sentences or thoughts. So for example, trigger warning, teacher, trigger warning, I'm about to talk about the Great Gatsby. Within the Great Gatsby, there's wide income inequality, so this might offend some of the poor students in class. Soft is what I always say. These people are very soft. Free speech zones. Anyone ever encountered those? Free speech zone is something no bigger than a parking space on a college campus where only within that zone between the hours of 10 and 2 and prior approval with the administration can you speak freely. Of course, they have to approve what you're going to say about any ideas, perspectives, or values. It's always enforced unfairly against conservative students and conservative groups, but Planned Parenthood and the Hillary for America campaign can gallivant around campus, say whatever they want, and it's not enforced against them. Microaggressions, trigger warnings, free speech zones. Oh, but there's one more that's really fun. Safe spaces. Anyone heard of safe spaces before? Now, I'm not making this up. Not making this up. A safe space is a physical location on a college campus where students can seek refuge, where they hear ideas that are so offensive to them they consider themselves to be physically unsafe. That's right. Speech is now considered to be a form of assault on college campus. So for example, when George Will went to Harvard University, George Will, are you kidding me? Like, not that offensive of a speaker. They had to create a safe space. Within the safe space had crayons, Play-Doh, milk and cookies, and teddy bears for students that needed to rehabilitate after hearing about why free market principles are the greatest people for all people. And that's so offensive for the Harvard students. They need to seek refuge. Look no further for what's going on in our college campuses than two examples, again to Harvard and then Notre Dame. At the Notre Dame commencement address last month, Vice President Pence came, former governor of Indiana, came to give the commencement address. Instead of the leftist students sitting quietly and enjoying what should have been the best day of their lives, 100 students, and their parents, mind you, stood up in protest in the middle of the speech and left the commencement address because they found his ideas to be so dangerous and so terribly threatening to society. Now imagine that. Imagine on your commencement day, your graduation day, you walk and stand up to the Vice President of the United States, who used to be the governor of that state, who also happens to be Catholic at Notre Dame. And what does the administration say? What heroic, courageous students. Now, could you imagine for a second, if conservatives did that when Joe Biden came and spoke at Notre Dame? They would have had their diplomas revoked. Seriously, the double standard's unbelievable. Look at Harvard, where they have now black-only graduation ceremonies because they, quote, want to highlight the oppression against the African-American community. Look, if you are a black student at Harvard, you're not oppressed. Okay? I mean, let's just be honest, okay? I mean, you're quite lucky, actually, okay? You're very lucky. And what we have found is a pattern of exactly what the left is doing on a national stage, what they're doing on college campuses. They want to create a culture of victims. If you're looking for someone to blame, you're never going to run out of you're never going to run out of people. And when you have a culture of victims, people like Bernie Sanders who sell a victimhood entitlement mentality, it becomes a whole heck of a lot easier. Because if you're always looking at someone else's fault, it's the billionaires, it is the millionaires, it is the evil corporations, it's always someone else's fault, or it is we're a colonial, racist, terribly divided country, then it's very easy to sell dangerously socialistic ideas. It's easy to celebrate the political gains of this last year, and I was right there celebrating with you with the presidency on down. But I look back, and I did some more thinking and studying about this, when an outward socialist, as Bernie Sanders, got over 15 million votes in the Democratic primary, who actually won the Democratic primary, got it stolen by Hillary Clinton. She stole it from him. And a majority of his votes came from people under the age of 30. That should horrify you. Because there's a generation that is now voluntarily and willingly wanting to embrace the most dangerous ideology of the last 100 years, an ideology that has killed over 100 million people, an ideology that we as Americans fought and won against in the 1980s, and now he wants to voluntarily bring back socialism to these shores. Not on our watch, folks. Not on our watch. We are the most vocal. Thank you. Socialism sucks. I love it. Right there. I love it. We're not afraid to say it because, you know what? Socialism is the most dangerous ideology ever tried by man. It creates human mediocrity. It lowers potential. It makes societies more secular. It absolutely abolishes private philanthropy and charity, and it destroys humanity at its core. Look at Western Europe. I mean, those are some more mild versions of socialism. Every single country is bankrupt. They take the entire month of August off. They have very little to no ambition. I debated a socialist the other day. He said, socialism is wonderful. I said, really? Like Cuba? Like Venezuela? Like Argentina? Like Brazil? Like North Korea? Like Indonesia? I said, which exact socialist example do you think is great? And he said, oh, Spain. I said, oh, Spain. Great. 40% unemployment, rioting in the streets, bankrupt, dependent on capitalist countries to support them. Tell me how it's so wonderful about that. Oh, they have free education. Free education, you mean 70% tax rates to pay for your free education. Must be nice to have someone else pay for your livelihood. Thank you. Essentially, it's remarkable to me. And when we debate these socialists on campus, which is something we do frequently, we ask this question. This is all you got to do. 10 seconds or less how to smash a socialist's worldview. 10 seconds or less. Ask this question. Do you trust the government? And they will inevitably say, no, I don't trust the government. Then why do you want to make it bigger? Right? That's it. That's the whole thing. Because at that moment, if they don't trust the government, if they don't trust politicians, why give them more of your money? I asked the socialists the other day, we encounter a lot of them, professors and the like. I say, do you think the VA and the Postal Service is well run? They say, no. And you want these people in charge of our health care? You want the post office workers in charge of our health care? And I said, what do you think is something that runs well? Like, well, Amazon works well. I was like, okay. He's like, Facebook and Google. And I said, maybe I should just, maybe you should make my argument for me. Because everything government touches is inefficient, is bloated, runs out of money, and the free market is much more efficient and solves problems a lot better. And I don't know why our party is so afraid to talk about that. It's like we have to talk about in these vague, vanilla-like generalities. Oh, well, you really don't want to repeal all of Obamacare. We just want to repeal. No, it's a disaster entitlement program that's bankrupting this country and future generations. Repeal the whole thing. Get rid of it. I don't understand. I'm low on time, but let me tell you, I've never been more optimistic about the future of this country, because not only politically were there great gains in the last year, but the next generation after millennials, Generation Z, is the most conservative libertarian generation that's ever come across. They don't like government, they don't trust people in power, and they respect free enterprise. Our organization, Turning Point USA, is going to bring the fight to where it matters most, to college and high school campuses, win minds, win hearts, fight against socialism. We are going to win, and they are going to lose. Thank you so much.
Please welcome Centennial Institute 1776 scholar Adam Densmore.
I've got a question for you. What do you get when you combine a San Diego State University alum, a Republican lawmaker, the CEO of a real estate financial group, a family man, an entrepreneur, and a 2018 candidate for Colorado State Governor? That's what our next speaker is about to show us. Victor Mitchell's had a career spanning from starting his transportation business while still in college to working as the CEO of over 7 different companies. He served on the Colorado State Legislature and now resides in Castle Rock with his wife, Amy, their 3 children, Lauren, David, and Emily. Please join me in welcoming Victor Mitchell.
If you change your mind, take a chance, I'm the first in line. Honey, I'm still free. Take a chance on me. If you need me, let me know. Gonna be around.
Well, hello, everybody. It's great to be here. Wow, that was loud, huh? My name is Victor Mitchell, and I am a candidate for governor, and it's just a pleasure to be here tonight. What a great crowd, and what a great event here. I appreciated that warm introduction. I don't think Abba's ever introduced me before, but that's a first. So I appreciate everybody coming here tonight, and people ask me all the time, Vic, well, why are you running as a candidate for governor? And the answer is pretty straightforward. You can be frustrated, you can be angry, you can be disillusioned, or you can put yourself out there and be part of the solution. You can step up and try to lead. My background, as he just introduced, has been an entrepreneur. Actually, I've been an entrepreneur since I was 21. I've built 6 companies over the last 30 years. And that's exactly the type of leadership we desperately need to move Colorado forward. My wife and I came here some 21 years ago, and it was actually never our intention to stay here. We started a company, and we fell in love with Colorado like so many people do. It became our forever home. In fact, 2 of our 3 kids have been born here. But Colorado's changing. There's some great challenges, of course, that we face in our state, but there's also some tremendous opportunities that we're not exploiting. And therefore, I think it's really important to get a businessman, an entrepreneur, to lead our state forward. But most importantly, I think it's very important to put big ideas forward, fresh ideas that will challenge the status quo and shake things up. And I thought I'd share a couple of them with you in the few minutes I have here tonight. When I was in the legislature some 10 years ago, there was roughly 1,000 businesses in Colorado that were regulated. We estimate today that there's between 3,000 and 3,500 businesses today that are now regulated. This is in over a period of 8 years. That's just not good enough. We had over 5,000 small businesses just in 2014 have closed their doors in Colorado. We've added 120,000 pages of new rules and regulations. My strategy is to bring outsiders similar to myself, but have no aspirations to run for office, that have deep private sector industry experience, and do a top-to-bottom review of our regulatory schemes and figure out which ones can be repealed entirely or changed. So we can start promoting entrepreneurship, business ownership again, take risks, get back our animal spirits that we once had before this current governor has led us so far to the left. The other issue I care very much about is health services. Our son is his second year right now at West Point. Last year we were at the Army-Navy game. Thank you. Last year we were at the Army-Navy game. I don't know if we have any Army veterans in here, but Army won for the first time in like 15 years. Go Army. And my wife and I have been supportive of a health clinic, a rural health clinic in Southern Virginia. So after the game, we said, why don't we just drive down there? It couldn't be that far. Well, it was some 400 miles away. And in this tiny little, what we saw was nothing less than a miracle. This tiny little health clinic is run entirely with nurse practitioners. They have basically no administrative overhead. They don't accept any insurance. They're servicing, this past year, they serviced 25,000 people. They're doing everything. They're screening for mental health. They're doing mammograms. They're doing colonoscopies. They charge $10 for a visit, $4 for a prescription drug voucher. And again, they don't accept any insurance. Their entire budget last year was $1.5 million, and they serviced 25,000 people. And I say this today because we've been in this binary debate for just too long about the Unaffordable Care Act or Trump Care. But we have to start figuring out ways to address the 40% of Coloradans today that either have insurance and can't afford their deductibles, or young people that have opted not to buy insurance at all. These types of, and I share this story with you because these are the types of innovations that are available today. They're happening all over the country. We have to figure out a way to get out of Medicaid entirely, which is blowing up our budget. And we have to figure out to do more with less as a state government. In fact, we've actually increased Colorado's budget by more than $10 billion over the last 10 years. So I'm putting forward very specific ideas to modernize our transportation system, to triple the amount of STEM graduates in Colorado. Right now, we're graduating about 1 in 4 kids with science, technology, engineering, math. I want to triple that. I plan to freeze all college tuition for the entire term of my administration, and also drive down the, thank you, and also try to drive down the high costs of affordable housing for kids. Some of our kids are paying upwards of $35,000 a year to go to an in-state tuition. It's just not good enough. So my name is Victor Mitchell. I can tell you that there are a number of candidates, of course, in this race, but I'm the only candidate that has a unique set of both public and private sector experience. I served in the legislature, but I've been an entrepreneur for 30 years. But most especially, I was raised by a 90% blind and deaf single mother. I know what it is to fight tremendous adversity. I also know what it is to rise up and become successful. And there's nothing wrong with being successful. We need to promote success again, not demonize it. And final, I just want to say something about my conservative credentials. I was actually the only person in this race, in the governor's race, that actually has a proven conservative voting record. I had an A+ rating with the NRA. I also am a pro-life practicing Catholic, and I'd love to see Colorado do a lot more to decrease the amount of abortions we have and increase the number of adoptions. So in final, thank you guys for coming out tonight. Thank you so much for all the people from out of state that are coming and promoting our economy here in Colorado. We very much appreciate you. We welcome you. And let's get started. Thank you so much. God bless. Have a great night.
All right, so Victor Mitchell is one of 4 gubernatorial candidates that we're going to have here at the Western Conservative Summit. And this is what I've said to all 4 of them. 2 years ago, there was one candidate that came, he worked the crowd, he got a booth, he spent some time. It was Darrell Glenn, and he was running for Senate. Now, when Darrell Glenn needed grassroots conservatives for support, they turned out big time for him, and he ended up winning the primary. So it's great to have so many gubernatorial candidates here with us. So what we're going to do throughout the weekend is they're going to get a 5-minute speech like Victor just had. Then they're going to be interviewed by my good friend Joey Bunch. Joey Bunch spent 14 years with the Denver Post, is now with ColoradoPolitics.com, and he's going to ask some questions and spend some time with each of the gubernatorial candidates so you get a sense of who they are and can make an informed decision during the next primary race next June. So we'll go ahead and start with Victor and Joey.
All right, Victor. You want to sit down? Yeah, let's do. Let's make yourselves comfortable. Take a nap.
These are very fancy. They're very fancy chairs.
Victor, I want to start with a couple of ground rules so that we can cover as much ground as possible and try to keep our answers concise, about 2 minutes, so we can go through several. Tonight's not a steak dinner at Elway's. It's more like the drive-through at Arby's. So, and I hope that doesn't offend anybody, but I think the curly fries know who they are. So, let's get started. The religious liberty is an issue that's very important to the Centennial Institute. It's very important to Colorado Christian. And it's very important to the people in this crowd. But we as Americans believe in liberty for all. So where's the balance between religious liberty and preventing discrimination against LGBTQ people?
Well, thank you. I mean, I absolutely believe in all forms of religious liberty, and I also think we need to do a lot more for tort reform. And we got to stop all these kinds of lawsuits. If somebody doesn't want to serve a cake or something else, they should have that prerogative. But more importantly, there's a humanity to this. I mean, if there is legitimate discrimination, of course, there should be the right to sue, and they should pursue that. But there should be a shifting of costs. We've just become way too litigious as a society. I strongly believe in the First Amendment. I've always supported the First Amendment, and I think all forms of religious liberty should be adhered to. And if somebody doesn't want to serve or provide certain services based on their religious preferences, they should have the right to do that.
But can you speak to the rights of LGBTQ people? Where do their rights end?
You know, I mean, I believe in traditional marriage, although I generally support civil unions. And I think that their rights should be protected like every other American's rights should be protected, but they shouldn't be overreaching. I mean, we've had these kinds...
They're applauding for me.
The one that comes to mind is the bathroom incidents where, you know, transgender bathroom. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. There's about 1 in 300 people are identify themselves as transgender. We shouldn't be modifying our schools and everything else to accommodate transgender bathrooms. You can't even go now into a Starbucks and have a men's or a women's bathroom. So I think it's gone too far. But we should be respectful. They're just as much American and Coloradan as you and I are. But they've gone, in my opinion, they've gone a bridge too far.
Thank you for that answer. Probably the biggest issue facing Colorado, and anybody who drove here tonight knows this, is transportation and traffic jams. And in the last legislative session, legislators weren't able to do much on that. So what's your plan to address transportation? And if your answer is take it out of the existing budget, tell me where you're going to cut.
Well, I guess, how much time do we have here? 2 minutes, okay.
Remember, drive through at Arby's.
First and foremost, we have to replace the executive director of CDOT. He's a disaster. We got to bring in an outsider. We've got to bring in somebody that has worked in development and private industry for decades, somebody that has a deep love for Colorado, understands construction and development. CDOT actually has about $1.5 billion budget here in Colorado, but only about 1/3 of that, that's right, about $500 million a year actually goes into roads, construction, infrastructure. 2/3 of it is either in studies or in overhead. They have 3,300 employees today. So we have to reform all of CDOT, including their bidding process, the time it takes to build projects. We also have a legislative audit committee that's an obscure committee in the General Assembly. And I want to change that audit committee from financial auditing, which is basically determining if all the P's and Q's are right, whether your assets and liabilities match up, to performance auditing. It takes all the partisanship out of it and audits CDOT and figure out what right size that department to how many employees they have. If we save just 3 to 4% by converting to performance auditing from financial auditing, that's $1 billion a year, $1 billion a year of extra that can go into transportation. The final thing I want to say about transportation is they also have about $1 billion on their books today of cash and cash equivalents. I'm going to deploy all of that. So by simply just reforming the way the system is done, there's as much as $2 billion that could be poured into transportation without any user fees or new taxes. We just have to do more. We have to be smarter about this. We have to be tougher about this. And we have to start delivering for the people of Colorado. I couldn't be more frustrated with the traffic jams myself. You can't even enjoy the great outdoors of our state on I-70. We have traffic congestion now. Yesterday, from Boulder to Castle Rock, it took me 2.5 hours to get back. I mean, something has to be done, and I plan on doing something about it.
Well, you hit on spending, so let's talk about spending a minute. Medicaid. Medicaid rolls have tripled in Colorado over the last 10 years. And if Republicans aren't able to repeal or replace and/or Obamacare, we're looking at that federal match running out in a few years on an item that's already 40% of our state budget. What are you going to do about Medicaid?
Well, let's talk about Medicaid for a second. We've had a $640 million increase in Medicaid. And let's talk numbers. The Medicaid expansion now, if you earn more than $16,000 a year in Colorado, you're not eligible for Medicaid expansion. So what we've done now is we have about 40% of Coloradans between the millennials and the people that currently have insurance, mostly middle-income people here in Colorado, cannot afford to access high-quality, patient-centered care because they simply just can't meet their deductibles, even though they have insurance. We need to pull ourselves entirely out of the Unaffordable Care Act. I'm going to pull ourselves out of the exchange. I'm going to get Medicaid down to downsize. Hopefully Congress is going to do their job. Every single Republican, every single one of them, campaigned on repealing Obamacare. Why is this so difficult? I just don't understand it. We just lack leadership. I guess we don't have enough outsiders in there to do the right thing. But my plan is to build nurse practitioner clinics, high quality, low cost, affordable, accessible to everybody, and create block grants to create entrepreneur block grants of physician assistants and nurse practitioners that can provide similar to the model that I described earlier in Southern Virginia. These types of innovations are available today. They do a lot. They can do a lot more than Medicaid. I mean, 85% of docs in Colorado don't even accept Medicaid. They don't even accept it. It's rationed, low-quality care. We just have to get out of it entirely. It's going to ultimately bankrupt our state.
Well, you've done such a good job of being concise on your other questions. Let me ask you one I think you're going to like. You've started a lot of businesses, very successful businesses in Colorado. What were the hurdles that you had to clear, and how can you clear those hurdles out for other people?
God, there's been so many hurdles I've had to overcome in my life. I mean, when my telecom company became one of the largest, most successful private telecom companies in the country, and I started it with $36,000, every single person told me it would not be successful. Every single. I had bankers telling me that. I had the major service providers telling me that. I had the retailers telling me that. So we've had to come over great obstacles. My current business today is a disruptive lending company that we displace banks, and we provide services to small developers. I mean, I've been told this my whole life, so make no question about it. The naysayers are going to say, we can't reform healthcare. We can't reform transportation. We can do it. We just need some imagination. We need some creativity. And also, we've become terribly risk averse. I mean, I'm never going to, if I'm fortunate enough to be your next governor, you can be rest assured I will never run for another office. I'm not indebted to any special interests, and I'm always going to put Colorado first. But that type of thinking is frankly what's needed to run our state. But
not everybody's as smart as you are. So how do you help the little guy start a small business?
got to get regulations off people's backs. I mean, first and foremost. We've had 120,000 new pages of rules and regulations in Colorado since 2009, 120,000 pages. We're regulating 11-year-olds who want to play Little League Baseball in Denver. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. We're crushing so many small businesses, and people they actually believe they can do better working in government. We've got to change that mindset. And we got to start promoting entrepreneurship, rewarding success, encouraging success. We've got to get user fees down. We've got to get regulations to the point where people say, you know what, you can get a decent return for the amount of risk that we're going to be putting forward. But this type of thinking is exactly what's needed. I hope to be the entrepreneur governor that rewards and recognizes many small businesses and encourages them. And you know what, it's also okay to fail. It's not terrible to fail. You'll learn a lot more from failures than you do from successes.
George, you've done a great job here. I think the people here at the, George, I'm sorry, Victor. You've done a great job here tonight, and I think the people will get to know you a little bit better. I'll know your name better next time, and I hope that we all become better friends over the next year and a half, because politics isn't war, it's volleyball, so let's play it that way. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Nice to meet everybody. God bless.
Please welcome Project Development Manager for Worldviews, Calling and Culture, Dave Stacker.
Well, life on the farm is kind of laid back. Ain't much an old country boy like me can't hack. It's early to rise, early in the sack. Thank God I'm a country boy. Well, a simple kind of life never did me no harm. Raising me a family.
Little John Denver. All right, good evening. I'm pleased to be representing Worldviews, Calling and Culture tonight. Don Hood, the founder and CEO of Worldviews, was supposed to be here, but due to unforeseen circumstances, he's unable to attend. They told Don he could have 10 minutes. I'm going to try to do this in 5, if that's okay with you guys. Does that work? That's probably the loudest applause in a while, huh? All right. So Worldviews, Calling and Culture is a Christian-based nonprofit providing training and resources to educate, equip, and engage believers to impact our communities and our culture. We partner with the Colson Center for Christian Worldview by facilitating the Colorado affiliate of their Fellows program. We support the Centennial Institute, Summit Ministries, John Jay Institute, and others, as well as providing speakers and workshops for local churches and organizations. Don and Worldviews have been major sponsors of the Western Conservative Summit since its inception, and we have been pleased to watch it grow into the largest conservative gathering outside of D.C. And boy, are we thankful it's outside of D.C. Actually, I'm just blessed to be here for the 5th straight year with the opportunity to hang around a lot of really smart people and hope that some of it rubs off. Jeff Hunt and the Centennial Institute have once again provided a stellar lineup. We've had the opportunity to attend valuable workshops and to hear from the likes of John Bolton, Katie Pavlich, and in a few minutes, Cal Thomas. And in the next couple of days, the hits just keep on coming. Some of my favorites are still ahead. Bill Bennett, Frank Gaffney, Dr. Jeff Myers of Summit Ministries, and you do not want to miss that one. And Os Guinness, wow. But now comes the punchline. So what? What are we going to do with this? How do we make good on this year's theme and make goodness fashionable? What can you and I do to impact our culture for good and help create a healthy society for our kids and grandkids? My wife and I, this is really personal, we have 12 grandkids and a 13th scheduled to arrive in December. What kind of a world are they going to inherit? Just over 2 years ago, I had the privilege of addressing this gathering one day after the Obergefell decision. Not exactly a high watermark for Christian conservatives. And at that time, I said the key going forward was changing hearts and minds, taking a page from the pro-life movement that has been slowly but surely moving the country in a positive direction since another infamous Supreme Court decision. Changing hearts and minds is not quick, it's not easy. It starts with ourselves, but it has to include the next generation. Do you know that 4 out of 5 young adults say they have no sense of purpose? Let's give them a purpose and make goodness fashionable. Or as William Wilberforce and his Clapham Circle would say, let's have a reformation of manners. To do that, we need a threefold strategy: educate, equip, and engage. This weekend, you will be exposed to many individuals and groups that can help in each of these areas. So educate yourself through a program like the Colson Fellows. Educate and equip a teen or a young adult by sending them to Summit Ministries' 2-week intensive program. And then help figure out how to reach younger kids. When you realize what kids as young as 5 and 6 years old are being exposed to, it is imperative that we start early and be intentional. The LGBTQ community is very intentional. Planned Parenthood is very intentional. I mentioned earlier that this is very personal to me. Well, a couple of months ago, it became even more personal. God put me in a position that 6 months ago wasn't even on my radar. In May, I became the executive director of Longmont Christian School and was introduced to a whole new world that needs your help. I would encourage you to find a school in your area and get involved. Volunteer your time. Offer to substitute teach. Scary, I know, but I bet you have a lot to offer. And support them financially through your church or your civic organization. Scholarship a student who doesn't have the financial ability to attend a quality private school. There are families who want and frankly need alternatives to the public schools, and we need to provide excellence in academics and athletics, as well as a solid, truth-based Christian education. That takes resources and a commitment from people like you. So, educate yourself and others. Equip yourself and others to engage this culture that so desperately needs what we have to offer. Thanks so much to the many people who are making this weekend possible, especially Jeff Hunt and the Centennial Institute for educating, equipping, and engaging the next generation. Thank you.
Please welcome Centennial Institute 1776 scholar Tyler King.
Good evening. The instantly recognizable Cal Thomas is one of the most widely syndicated op-ed columnists in America. His work has also appeared in USA Today and Fox News. He's previously worked for NBC News and hosted a program on CNBC, which was nominated for a Cable ACE Award in 1995. In 2011, Mr. Thomas received the William F. Buckley Jr. Award for Media Excellence from the Media Research Center. He has authored 10 books, most recently, What Works? Common Sense Solutions for a Stronger America. He gives daily radio commentary, appearing on more than 300 stations. It is a privilege to introduce such an influential figure, so I'll end it in his favorite way to be introduced. You all know Cal, so here he is.
Please welcome national acclaimed columnist Cal Thomas.
In the words of Elvis, thank you very much. And thanks for staying so late. My goodness, this is usually past my bedtime, East Coast time. Well, I've been given a strict limitation on time, so I want to get right into it. Some of this is going to depress you, but I defy you to argue with me on it because, you know, I'm from Washington, where the only politicians with convictions are in prison. There's a line from the wonderful film La La Land, which perfectly describes Washington as well as Hollywood. These are places where everything is worshiped, but nothing is valued. On his program a couple of weeks ago, Rush Limbaugh talked about how we have lost a sense of common sense. I think it's worse than that. We now accept nonsense as normal. if indeed anything can be considered normal in our LGBTQ anything goes culture. G.K. Chesterton once observed that the danger when men stop believing in God is not that they believe in nothing, but that they believe in anything. The late Catholic Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen said 50 years ago, America, it is said, is suffering from intolerance. It is not. It is suffering from tolerance. Tolerance of right and wrong, truth and error, virtue and evil, Christ and chaos. Our country, he said, is not nearly so overrun with the bigoted as it is overrun with the broad-minded. When asked about any religious affiliation in a poll, 20% of millennials said none. And add to these the secular progressives who have dominated the news media, academia, and Hollywood for decades, and one does not need to be a prophet to predict the future of America seems anything but secure. The slaughter of the innocents has reached 60 million and counting. Behavior once regarded as perverted is now called mainstream, and woe to anyone suggesting it is wrong. The standard for determining right from wrong was abandoned in the 60s, and we're left with no standard higher than whatever an individual believes to be true for him or her, if indeed we can use those pronouns in the age of gender neutrality. A Canadian family recently declined to name the gender of their newborn, wanting the child to make its own determination. You know, that used to be obvious in the bathtub when I was growing up. I don't know about you. What Scripture calls abominations, people now call orientations and choice. We have become our own God, more sophisticated than the false gods that tempted ancient Israel, but with no greater power. I believe we are on the verge, if we have not passed the verge, of that moment about which Paul the Apostle wrote in Romans. It could be an editorial for our time, 2,000 years later. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of people who suppress the truth by their wickedness, since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God or gave thanks to him, but their thinking became futile and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like a mortal human being and birds and animals and reptiles. Therefore God gave them over, the most frightening words in Scripture in my view, gave them over in the sinful desires of their hearts to sexual impurity for the degrading of their bodies with one another. They exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshiped and served created things rather than the Creator. Because of this, God gave them over to shameful lusts. Even their women exchanged natural sexual relations for unnatural ones. In the same way, the men also abandoned natural relations with women and were inflamed with lust for one another. Does this sound like America today? Men committed shameful acts with other men and received in themselves the due penalty for their error. Furthermore, just as they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, so God gave them over to a depraved mind, so that they do what ought not to be done. They have become filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, and depravity. They are full of envy, murder, grief, strife, deceit, and malice. They are gossips, slanderers, God-haters, insolent, arrogant, and boastful. They invent ways of doing evil. They disobey their parents. They have no understanding, no fidelity, no love, no mercy. Although they know God's righteous decree that those who do such things deserve death, they not only continue to do these things, but also approve of those who practice them. Is anything in that passage unlike what we are witnessing today in our time? Now, does anyone believe a political party or leader can, through the power of politics or government, reverse this? Why would such people be responsive to conservative agendas, much less biblical truth? Isaiah says God regards all nations as a drop in the bucket and less than nothing. Every day in Washington, there are efforts to improve things, change culture, overcome our human nature with no acknowledgement that we are sinners who don't need to be reformed, but rather transformed. The political parties see too many of us as unfortunates in need of yet another government program to repair our miserable state. Remember Reagan's great line, the only proof of eternal life in Washington is a government program. These have and will continue to fail because only the life-changing message of Jesus Christ can transform individuals and, if achieved in sufficient numbers, change nations. Call it bubble up, not trickle down. Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. We are being reproached for our many sins, and still we persist in them. Again, as Paul writes in Romans 8, God has built futility into his creation in hope that the creation will turn to him. Is there anything we haven't been tried in most of our lifetimes? We've tried Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives, mushy, moderates, white papers, blue ribbon commissions, study groups, experts, academics, the best and the brightest. If the answer is no, and it is, perhaps we should try God, the only source with any hope of individual and national restoration. We are no longer one nation, and we are certainly not under God. We sing God Bless America at ball games, and all presidents in recent years have ended their speeches with this statement. But my question is, why should he? What are we doing to deserve God's blessing? If he exiled ancient Israel for abandoning him, what makes us think we are more special than the only nation ever to enjoy a covenant relationship with him? Well, how will judgment come? Or is it already here? In ancient times, armies slaughtered the Israelites, or they were exiled to Babylon when they abandoned God and worshiped false deities. The West is being invaded by a foreign religious power intent on destroying us. Our secular progressive leaders here and in Europe pretend that letting them in will make them more like us. Quite the opposite. They see our tolerance as weakness. They know our ways and are using them and our Constitution to impose themselves. It may take them 100 years, but as history shows, they are very patient. Believe what they say about a worldwide caliphate, destroying our Constitution and imposing Sharia law. Believe it because they tell us their intentions and practice their worldview wherever they get the chance. Now, do all Muslims believe this? We want to believe not, but their Quran demands it, and if they don't believe it, they are disobeying their so-called holy book. Investigate for yourselves, and then, if you're a follower of Jesus of Nazareth, learn how to witness to them. Around the world, Muslims are now being converted and have a new hope of heaven they have not had in their previous religion. Ask them, they'll tell you. Now, when a religion demands that infidels be killed or subjugated to the will of their God, secular Democrats, a little Freudian slip. You know, Jesus dined with Republicans and sinners, those were the early Democrats. All right, just kidding for any Democrats here, I love you too. Secular diplomats, that's all folks, secular diplomats, usually I'm not allowed to stay up this late without a note from home. Secular diplomats will not be successful in getting them to change their minds when to do so would mean, according to their doctrine, spending eternity in hell. Now, is there a short-term way to address these problems and many others? I believe there is, but it won't come from Washington, which is dysfunctional to its core, as we've seen very recently. Instead, it will come through individuals like you and like me. I would suggest at least 3 approaches. There are more, but I'll just deal with 3. The first is, let's get off defense. We don't need to defend our positions. We should force the secular progressives to defend their failed policies. It is the left. It is the left, not conservatives, who have brought the nation to near financial ruin with a $20 trillion debt and more to come. It is not our values that have poisoned relationships between men and women. Credit or blame for that goes to Hugh Hefner's Playboy philosophy and Helen Gurley Brown's Cosmo magazine. It isn't us, but them who have ruined the family, promoting behavior that has produced incurable venereal diseases and encouraged what used to be called shacking up and easy divorce. It is the left, not us, who have ruined education. Spending on public education, which is at record levels, has failed to produce better educated young people who can compete with brilliant minds elsewhere in the world. Let's get our children and grandchildren out of these re-education camps where they are taught they evolved from slime and their nearest relative is down at the zoo, and that's why they like bananas on their cereal. Look up two words. Look up two words in a concordance, teach and learn, and see if children on loan to us from God, they're not ours, they're His, He made them, we only helped a little in the process. But see if those requirements in Scripture match up to what is being taught in the government schools. Put them in private schools or homeschool them where they'll get a real education and, more importantly, a moral foundation. Let's take a page from the left and start with poor and minority students who are being denied a decent education and therefore a decent future. Some will recall Alabama Governor George Wallace famously standing in the schoolhouse door in the early 60s in an attempt to keep African American children out. Now the left stands in the doors of failing inner city schools, trying to keep them trapped inside because of contributions from the teachers' unions. It is an immorality. It is a form of discrimination and racism unlike any other. Let's turn this issue around and shove it down their throats. The Wall Street Journal reported last week that vouchers are working, as the new Secretary of Education well knows. Boosting grades in English and soon math. Get behind them in this state or wherever you come from. Get behind pregnancy help centers and support them with money, prayers, and volunteers. Next to salvation, there is no greater satisfaction than holding a baby in your arms you have helped to save and to tell a woman the truth and to see her life changed. It's happened with me, and there's nothing like it. And then let's strengthen our marriages. My wife passed away in February after a long health struggle. We were married 51 years. I miss her, but I'm confident I will see her again. Did we have differences? Of course. When you take a second sinner under your roof, you double the number of sinners. But we worked everything out because Jesus of Nazareth was at the center of our marriage, and we knew it was to Him we were ultimately accountable. It was He who taught us that love is not a feeling, but a commitment, a covenant, like He made with us when He said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Well, how about the media, of which I've been a part my entire professional life? Yes, most have a liberal bias, but bashing them doesn't change their minds. Here are several ideas. When you see something you like, as rare as that may be, and especially if it is correct, send the reporter a note, a tweet, a Facebook message, or an old-fashioned letter. Meet a local reporter or a news director. If you have an idea or perspective you believe should be reported, respectfully share it. Encourage conservative young people to enter the field. They'll have to be careful about their worldview initially, but if they are talented and work hard, they can succeed. I have. Send them to me, and I'll give them advice on how to do it. Then we need to reclaim the newspapers in this country. Young people are not reading them, but they should. Write editors and support those few conservatives who have columns in the paper. I was in the Denver Post for many years before editors changed and my column was dropped. Write and ask them to take me back, and if you live in the area and don't subscribe, tell the editor, or the better yet, the publisher, you will if they take me back. And not just me, but other conservative writers, though I hope you would start with my column. Lastly, and most importantly, pray for revival. It is the only path left to us that can turn lives and this nation around from our false pursuits. And let me tell you briefly about the revival of 1857, the most powerful one to ever touch this nation. We've had three, but that was the biggest one. It began when two men on their lunch hour in New York on Wall Street were so concerned about the direction of America that they decided to meet together once a week on their lunch hour and pray for revival. Pretty soon they were joined by some other men to do the same. And they met once a day on their lunch hour to pray for revival. The crowd got so big they could no longer stay in the little room they were in, and so they moved to the churches at night and invited their wives. It wasn't long before revival came. At the height of the revival, 10,000 people a week were coming to Christ in New York City alone. When it went down in the middle of winter to West Virginia, people were cutting holes in the ice and being baptized, prompting one commentator to say, when Baptists do that, you know they're on fire. When the revival jumped the Atlantic, crime virtually disappeared in London. The police had nothing to do, and so they formed quartets to sing at the revival meetings. There was a slowdown in the mines in Wales. Somebody asked, how could there be a slowdown if there was a revival? And the answer was that so many coal miners were converted and stopped using bad language that the horses couldn't understand what was being said to them. But this is the key, you see. A changed heart produces a changed life, and in sufficient numbers produce a changed nation. In one of his many parables, Jesus said, if we're faithful in small things, he'll give us charge over the bigger things. By doing the small things, the only things over which we have power and influence, the collective outcome will be bubble up and might even reach Washington. I want to thank you for your kind attention tonight. I hope some of these thoughts and reflections will be helpful as you balance between the two kingdoms. Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world, but he put us here for a brief time that we might share his love and redemptive power with others who need it. Again, we've tried everything else. Let's try him. He's not only the only one left, he's the only one who's ever been there. May God bless you. Thanks so much.
Again, welcome the chairman of the Western Conservative Summit, Jeff Hunt.
I think our founder would be very pleased with that speech. Bill Armstrong used to get up here and just say, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And that's what we heard from Cal. So thank you very much, Cal. What a way to end tonight. You know, we broke a record tonight. The most protests we've ever had here at the Western Conservative Summit. If they're not protesting you, you're not making a difference. So that was great. I think we're making a big difference here, and I think the world's seeing it. So a few announcements as we wrap, and we'll be back here tomorrow at 8:30 in the morning. I do want to let you know that you can buy DVDs and thumb drives of the, or CDs and thumb drives of the speeches, just right out here at Dove Cassettes and CDs. So just outside these windows, you can buy these. Which is great. The poll this year, the straw poll we're taking is on the governor's race. So you can vote out there by the CCU tables for the governor's race, and that'll be announced on Sunday, so you have between now and Sunday to do that. We're also doing an exhibitor bingo. So go visit the exhibitors. Because of their support, we can help put this Western Conservative Summit on. The exhibit hall's right through there. And the exhibitor bingo sheet should come up here. There you go. If you get signatures by all of them, turn them into us, and we're giving away a prize. We're raffling off a $100 gift certificate. So make sure you go visit our great exhibitors. Also, make sure you download our app. You can go to the Google Play or iTunes Store and type in Western Conservative Summit and download the app there. We're updating information on that as we speak. I think I'm hearing music, but one little thing I wanted to announce here that I thought was pretty fun. So we've been tracking the hashtags of a number of different conferences. ALEC met this week. Freedom Fest, the Libertarians are meeting in Las Vegas, of course. And the Western Conservatives are meeting here. And we've been tracking the hashtags. ALEC, as of today, had 1 million impressions. The Freedom Fest, the largest gathering of libertarians, has 2 million impressions. And as of tonight, the Western Conservative Summit has 7 million impressions online. So the voice of conservatives is getting out. So make sure you use that hashtag WCS17 to share and get the conversation happening in this room out to the nation. Finally, we'll see you tomorrow, 8:30. We're just getting started. Did you all have fun tonight? Was tonight fun? Great. We're going to start off with Bill Bennett, Tim Scott tomorrow. We have Dr. James Dobson. We have Jay Sekulow as well. We have members of the Freedom Caucus coming tomorrow. So this party's just getting started. We'll see you tomorrow at 8:30 right back here. God bless you. Have a good night.